The bishop's opening arises from the first move's pawn to a 4, followed by pawn to a 5, which are among the most standard opening moves in chess. Then, white plays bishop to c4, which can take the opponent out of their opening knowledge while still being a perfectly sound move. The most common response from black in this position is knight to f6, which develops the knight while simultaneously putting pressure on the pawn on e4. Since this is the move you will encounter most frequently in games, we will primarily analyze this response. Now, let's examine the move knight to f3, which counterattacks black's pawn on a5. Black has several possible responses, but let's first take a look at one of the most surprising ones, bishop to c5. Interestingly, bishop to c5 is one of the most commonly played moves in this position. However, despite being a standard-looking development, it actually leads to a terrible position for black. In fact, black has no idea how much they are about to suffer in the next few moves. At first glance, this setup resembles the Italian game, where both sides develop naturally. However, in this specific position, the usual ideas do not work for black. First, you simply capture the pawn on e5, thanking your opponent for the free material. At this point, black will realize they cannot continue mirroring white's moves. If they attempt knight takes a4, it immediately loses because of knight to e5, which not only recaptures but also puts pressure on black's pawn on f7, creating serious tactical threats. Black must defend the pawn on f7, or else you will simply capture it with either the bishop or the knight, both of which would be devastating. To keep the pawn safe, black will most likely choose to castle, thinking that they have solved their problems. However, this is far from the end of black's suffering. You continue with pawn to d4, attacking the bishop. As the bishop retreats, you unleash another unexpected tactical blow. Knight takes f7. This is a move black never saw coming. By sacrificing the knight, you are now forcing black's king into the open. After the king captures on f7, you play pawn to a 5. Black appears to be holding on, as nothing seems immediately lost. However, in reality, their king is completely exposed, and you are ready to continue your attack. On the next move, you can intensify the assault with queen to f3 or queen to h5, bringing another piece into the attack and leaving black in a hopeless position. At this point, you have a winning position, and one of the funniest and most commonly played lines continues with knight to d5. You follow up with queen to f3, delivering a double attack on both the king and the knight, similar to the well-known fried liver attack. The attacking patterns remain the same. Black is completely on the defensive. If black wants to save the knight, they have no choice but to keep moving their king forward, instead of developing the rest of their pieces. You continue your attack with pawn to c4. Attacking the knight once again, normally black will try to retreat the knight, but now you play pawn to d5, cutting off the king's escape squares. At this point, black's king is nearly checkmated. For example, if king captures on a 5, then queen to f4 delivers a beautiful checkmate, ending the game in style. This position arises after black played all the standard natural moves in the opening, believing they were following solid principles. However, they are now in serious trouble. There is also an amusing moment in this attack after you just played pawn to a 5, attacking black's knight. We already know that knight to d5 is not an option because of queen to f3, which delivers a crushing double attack on the king and knight. Since knight to d5 fails, black must look for other options. However, the diagonal is controlled by white's queen, meaning the knight cannot escape in that direction without being captured. Black may then decide to retreat the knight, thinking it is the safest way to avoid losing material. You respond immediately with queen to h5, keeping up the attack and putting even more pressure on black's position. This time, you deliver a check to the king while also attacking black's pawn. After black's king retreats, you play the brilliant move bishop to g5. The king may have temporarily escaped, but now black's queen is nearly trapped. With no good squares left for the queen and facing a significant material loss, black is practically forced to resign. Moving forward. Now that we know the seemingly natural move, bishop to c5 is actually a fatal mistake, leading to a devastating attack, let's explore other options. After capturing black's pawn on e5, launching a strong offensive, and securing a winning position, let's now examine another common move. Knight takes e4. Previously, black played knight to f6, attacking your pawn on a 4 without defending their own pawn on a 5. So, naturally, black might feel justified in capturing it. Here, I recommend playing knight to c3, which transforms the game into a Stafford Gambit-style position, but with white having an extra tempo. After knight takes c3, you respond with pawn takes c3, creating a classical gambit. Yes, you have sacrificed a pawn, but in return, you gain rapid development. While black remains completely underdeveloped, your pieces are already extremely active, setting you up for a strong attack. Your bishop is active, the other bishop is ready to join, the knight can capture the pawn or reposition, and the queen is well placed for an attack. Your army is far ahead in development, allowing you to start pressuring black immediately. There are also many traps in this position. The first thing your opponent will notice is that you are attacking black's pawn. If black tries to defend it, for example, with knight to c6, they overlook your hidden threat, in knight to g5, leading to a devastating attack. You attack black's pawn, and there is no sufficient defense. You simply win. Now let's take a step back. What if black defends the pawn with pawn to d6? First, you can still play knight to g5, which wins just as easily as black has no solid defense. However, there is also a fun alternative. Knight takes e5, a bold sacrifice in the style of the old masters. Your knight and bishop continue attacking the pawn, and if black captures the knight, you unleash bishop takes f7, deflecting the king and cutting off its defense of the queen. If the queen moves, you win. If the king moves away, you capture the queen. If the king tries to hold its ground, you play bishop to g5, adding another attacker and winning the queen regardless. The most stubborn defense for black is the awkward move pawn to f6. While it weakens black's diagonal and makes castling difficult, it does temporarily stop both of white's threats. For now, black is safe, but only temporarily. You will continue attacking. Black remains underdeveloped, and their king is weak and exposed, giving you the perfect opportunity to attack. Instead of continuing normally, you reroute your knight to h4, clearing the way for queen to h5, aiming for a scholar's mate-style checkmate. This is a major threat, forcing black to react. To defend, black plays pawn to g6, but in doing so, they continue playing pawn moves instead of developing their pieces. Since you are already far ahead in development, you should look to open the position, allowing your pieces to launch a direct attack on black's king. You play pawn to f4, and if black captures it, you are actually happy because it helps achieve your attacking goals. What makes this position so powerful is that black can easily go wrong, as many natural-looking moves turn out to be major mistakes. For example, if black plays pawn takes f4, it is very risky. You don't even need to recapture immediately. You can simply castle. Now, you are ready to attack along the e-file, while black's king is stuck and unable to castle. In a practical game, it is very likely that black will soon be defenseless against your attack. If black does not capture your pawn, you still have another strong threat, pawn to f5, which is very difficult for black to handle. The best defense for black is queen to a7, but they are unlikely to find it unless they are well prepared. Even if they are, you continue attacking with pawn to f5, aiming to clear the center so your queen can jump in and attack black's king. If black tries to stay safe by playing pawn to g5, attempting to push your knight away, you don't retreat. Instead, you play queen to h5, delivering check. The king is forced to move, which is already a huge advantage. Now you play a classic tactical move, knight to g6, taking advantage of the pinned pawn. This move also forks the queen and rook, guaranteeing that you will win material. If black captures your knight, you simply win the rook and continue your attack. Thanks for watching.